Hi, this is Lisa from Lisa's Sanctuary sharing another part of my healing journey with you today. This one's about physical conditions and illnesses and diseases and how they may manifest from trauma, how they may manifest in physical form. So when I talk about trauma, I'm not only referring to those really traumatic events that you would, rape, armed robbery, witnessing a car crash, things like that. Trauma for me is also when a child or an adult doesn't feel seen, heard, or loved. It creates emotions in our bodies when we're not comforted, when we don't feel supported, when we don't feel loved or valued. And so that creates trauma as well. I became interested in physical conditions manifesting when I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease, an autoimmune disease. In 2002, I was 19 at the time. And I speak and write of my experience from childhood sexual abuse and domestic violence relationships as an adult, and my healing from those abuse and the trauma. So as I speak and write of my experiences, I hear from a lot of people who also have been diagnosed with autoimmune conditions and physical diseases who also experience trauma. And I started to wonder if there was a link to it. And, there's lots of research out there, which is really good. When I was 14, I was going through making police statements and court process for childhood sexual abuse. So I had made a disclosure as I got older and, was to testify. But during all that time, I struggled. I struggled a lot mentally and emotionally. And I have my dog snoring next to me, if you can hear that too. I struggled a lot mentally and emotionally, and my parents actually took me to a psychologist who was trained in EMDR, which is like an eye movement desensitization. He explained it was for flashbacks. He could remove or erase, flatten the flashbacks. I was too worried at the time that it would, impede on my ability to recall memories when I needed to testify in court. So I actually didn't participate in it as much as what I, could have to get benefit out of it, because I absolutely believe it is beneficial to, victim survivors of trauma. And so so many years later, I had to put in a claim for victim services, and I needed to get a psychologist, a clinical report. And I actually went back to see that same psychologist. He did the clinical report for me. And he had asked about like pains and illnesses and things I'd had in my childhood and now. At the time, I think I was in my 20s. So he asked about what my life was now after experiencing, and he must have taken a really keen interest in trauma manifesting as physical illnesses, because when I was growing up, I used to get this pain in my hip. I think it was my left hip. And I remember having x-rays and ultrasounds done, and there was no reason for it. There was no medical reason why I would be having this, excruciating pain, which had me doubled over. And it wasn't until I participated in this clinical report that he made the link, and he said that a lot of trauma from childhood manifests in, aches, pains that don't have medical reasons. And it was something that sort of sat with me. So, as I've gotten older and sort of learnt more about Crohn's and, been along my healing journey, I implement a lot of tools and practices into my life now, which creates safety in my body, which is, meditating, mindfulness. I practice that so much more now because I absolutely know the benefit of creating safety in your body for your healing process. And so when I, heard from other people that they also had a physical condition, it led me down that research, which is made even more interesting by I have an eye thing going on at the moment, and I actually went to an eye specialist yesterday in Sydney. So the background of this is I woke up one morning in about July, and this year, it's 2021, And it just felt like I'd rubbed my eye too hard through the night or scratched it. And after a few more days, it was still red. So I'd gone to the chemist to get some drops. They didn't help. Went to the doctor. He said to me what he thought it was, but didn't know whether it was serious or, the non-serious type of keratitis. So I went to the optometrist, who wasn't really sure either. Meanwhile, I do, there's been a bit of stress. The COVID thing has created a lot of stress for me. I remember back to my relationship where I was, told what I could do and where I could go. And I know it's not a relationship, but a lot of the restrictions from, the government restrictions and rules, and just some of the stuff, you can't go to work if you do this and you can't, it triggered me a little bit from my relationship. So I have been sitting in stress. My body has been in stress mode. So I have put this down to, something to do with stress. So I made a conscious effort to start to, try to meditate more, to create safety in my body. So given that it sort of gets better and then gets worse and gets better and gets worse, I went to a specialist last week, an ophthalmologist, who, after looking at my eye, told me that he thought I had a lymphoma, an eye cancer, which was, pretty scary at the time, because I just didn't believe that it was that serious. I mean, it's taken me months. It's taken me from, July, and I think I got the ophthalmologist referral in about August from the optometrist, and it's taken me all of this time. I was then booked into a Sydney eye specialist who specialises in, eye cancers, and that's where I went yesterday. I made a little feel-good video on my birthday yesterday, on my, before I went to Sydney. So I've been really thinking lately about the trauma that I have experienced through childhood sexual abuse and domestic violence relationships, and the aftermath of that. I mean, that's not easy either. Healing is a journey. It can be messy. It's a process. And so I started thinking about, the different physical illnesses and conditions that our bodies can manifest as a cry for help. I'm sitting quietly today with, is my body trying to tell me something? What is it trying to tell me? Because when I went to the eye specialist yesterday, they don't believe that it's characteristic of lymphoma, but they're actually not sure what it is either, because, it's got some different characteristics which don't sort of fit. So is it trying to tell me something? Is it telling me that I'm, not meditating enough? And I know that sounds a bit simplistic, but I feel that there's a thought that I'm holding on to that is manifesting itself through, a physical condition. And if you look up adverse childhood events, or ACEs, there is research, so much research out there that tells us that a person who experienced an adverse childhood event, or a number of them, during their childhood is more likely to develop heart disease, to develop some cancers, to be diagnosed with depression or other mental health illnesses. And the more ACEs that you experienced in your childhood, the more susceptible or the more at risk you are for developing a health condition. And that's heavily researched. I know that, a 14-year-old sitting in my office with me, if she has experienced, or he has experienced, I think it's 4 ACE scores in her childhood, she is 12 times more likely to attempt to take her life than a 14-year-old who has experienced 0 ACE scores. So there's a lot more research out there about it. And I want you to think about, the trauma that you've experienced, the trauma that may sit in your body, and how it may be manifesting. Do you have an autoimmune condition? Do you have lupus? Do you have skin conditions, just asthma. I've heard that, you know, can and have a little bit in trauma. So I think it's really interesting to be mindful of that connection when, you know, when we're trying to just heal along from our trauma. When you begin to heal from trauma, you may experience things. Maybe that's what this is. Maybe I've been doing so much work over the last few months that it's coming out in my, I don't know. That's just a few, you know, little out loud thoughts. I founded Lisa's Sanctuary as a Facebook page because I wanted to share my experience and my stories of living in a domestic violence relationship, but also healing from it. And I wrote my book, Why I Stayed, when I was about 5 years. 5 years after I had left my first domestic violence relationship. It was part of my healing journey, but what I heard from a lot of people was it really helped them to hear somebody else's story so that they knew they weren't alone and they knew that they weren't crazy. And, you know, as horrible as it seemed, at least I wasn't the only one going through it. That's what a lot of people told me. And I know that I absolutely could not have been along my healing journey without professionals, and that's paying professionals and paid services and, you know, paying for workshops, because I believe there is a shortcut in the knowledge that somebody else has when you know, learn from somebody. It's like mentoring. And I'm beginning to do that now because I am far enough along in my healing journey that I can show you how I did it. I know now how I did it and how I got here and what else I need to do to keep going. So I absolutely believe in, you know, paying for shortcuts. It's an energetic thing as well, but also listening to the people who have been there, done that, healed from it, and really but listening to what they did and their processes, and just absorbing it and taking what works for you and then applying it to your life. So, you know, if you want to go into business, you look to your managers for advice, for guidance, for support, for information. I think that's like that in your healing journey too. So I'm going to be sharing a lot of my own personal healing experiences so that it may resonate with you, but so you can see how I did it and my thought process. I've wanted to make these videos for a long time, but I held a limiting belief that I wasn't safe to be seen, that it leaves me vulnerable, exposed when I create videos of my own personal life. I worked through those. I did create a video about that, about working through that limiting belief. So follow me for, you know, contributions to this healing space. I share my stories. I hope something resonates with you, and I wish you well along your healing journey, because it's a wonderful place to be in when you get to that space where you're not triggered and you can just breathe through it. It's beautiful, and that's why I do what I do. So my dogs are moving again. So not really sure what's going on with the eye. I'm going to look at doing a bit more, you know, meditation and really sitting quietly and asking myself, you know, for the answers, because I believe we all have the answers. We just need to tune in with what they are. So physical conditions and illnesses. Do you have any autoimmune diseases or conditions or skin conditions or something that, you know, the medical professionals aren't really sure what it is? Be interesting. Let me know if it's something that you've often thought about as well. If you wondered if there was a connection. Adverse childhood experiences. Look up ACEs. There's a lot of statistics on that too. And I'll make more videos about how I healed and the creating healing safety, creating safety in my body. You can find me at www.lisasanctuary.com.au or on Facebook. I share a lot of writing on there. And have a great day. You are significant because you are, and I love you because you exist. And I think that it's important everybody hears that, feels that, and believes it.